This is WFYI News Now. It's January 16th, and I'm Darian Benson. On today's show, Governor Eric Holcomb signs an executive order to fight against the propane shortage. Public pension recipients could get a boost from a bill moving along in the State House. A federal judge rules on the 25-foot buffer law for on-duty police. And lawmakers heard testimony on a parental rights bill.
Teachers there's no attorney-client privilege, let's just be clear. Aren't we just exacerbating the problem then?
Those stories coming up, but first, Indiana will continue to bear the brunt of a blistering winter storm that's sweeping across the U.S. for the next several days. Farah Yusri has info on how to stay safe as temperatures plummet.
First things first, stay inside whenever possible. If you have to drive, watch out. Make sure your devices are charged so you can get alerts and stay informed. And have an emergency plan in case you lose power. If you lose power, you should use a generator in a well-ventilated space, never inside. Experts say to also keep an eye on your plumbing. Frigid temperatures can make water freeze in pipes, increasing the pressure inside and causing them to burst. This can lead to extensive water damage. The city also has some warming centers around. You can access a full list on Indy Park's website. People who are experiencing homelessness should also check in with Wheeler Mission Shelters. I'm Farah Yusri.
For more information, including times and locations of warming centers and shelters for unhoused people, go to wfyi.org/news. And about 500,000 Indiana residents who rely on propane gas for heat could be facing a limited supply as cold temperatures throttle Indiana. Governor Eric Holcomb signed his first executive order of 2024 last night, seeking to avoid that. The order temporarily lifts restrictions on commercial drivers' hours on the road. Holcomb says that local propane distributors are beginning to face shortages. There are also fewer drivers than needed, and existing drivers have to travel longer distances for propane. Commercial drivers are now exempt from federal and state limits until the governor's order expires next Thursday, January 25th. In another story out of the State House, tens of thousands of public pension recipients would get a boost this year under legislation headed to the House floor. Brandon Smith reports legislation creating a 13th check unanimously cleared a House committee last week.
For decades, public pension recipients received a 13th check, an extra month's worth of benefits. But disagreement between the House and Senate last year over whether to do a check or a cost of living adjustment left those retirees without either. Jessica Love, executive director for the Retired Indiana Public Employees Association, told lawmakers that those thousands of older Hoosiers rely on their pensions.
And because inflation makes it impossible for their pensions to keep up, they depend on you to implement measures like this.
Senate Republican leaders are undecided on whether to support the bill. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
An Indiana law that gives on-duty police a 25-foot buffer that bystanders cannot cross does not violate the U.S. Constitution. That's according to a federal judge's ruling on Friday. The ACLU of Indiana filed a lawsuit last year challenging the law on behalf of Donald Nicodemus. Nicodemus runs a YouTube channel called Freedom to Film, on which he posts videos of what he calls newsworthy activities in and around South Bend, where he lives. The ACLU argued the 2023 law violated the First Amendment by giving police unchecked authority to stop people from getting close enough to observe their actions, even if those people aren't interfering with law enforcement. But federal judge Damon Lichty says police have a right to do their duties unimpeded, and any effect the buffer law has on the public's right to record on-duty police is incidental, Lichty says, and not unconstitutional. Lichty did acknowledge that individual police officers could enforce the law in an unconstitutional way, but says that wasn't true in this case. There is a second lawsuit challenging the buffer law brought by Indianapolis area media organizations. And for our final story today, a Senate committee heard testimony on a parental rights bill last week, creating an avenue for parents to sue governmental entities. As Lauren Chapman reports, those entities include schools, the Department of Child Services, and their employees.
Parents can sue if they believe their ability to direct their child's upbringing, religious instruction, education, or health care has been substantially burdened. And they can sue if they believe the governmental entity has withheld or directed their child to withhold information from the parent. The bill's author, Senate Judiciary Committee Chair Liz Brown, says the bill is largely because of concerns that schools are withholding information from parents about their children.
Teachers there's no attorney-client privilege, let's just be clear. Aren't we just exacerbating the problem then?
When asked about LGBTQ students who come out to their teachers and may ask that their parents aren't informed, Brown said teachers should facilitate those conversations. The bill was held in committee for additional amendments. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Lauren Chapman.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Aubriana Heron, Drew Doblin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Darian Benson. Our news director is Sarah Neal Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.